Leonardo was a truly unique person in terms of his curiosity. No one could have such a broad range of knowledge today. There's just too much to know.
The great gift of Leonardo, the thing that I think inspires everyone, and also why I think children identify with him, is I believe he didn't ever lose his child's eye. It's as though he was in a landscape of meaning at all time, and scientific or artistic revelation was behind the placement of every rock.
I'd like at some point to take a camera into nature as Leonardo's eye, and simply to get a cameraman and somebody who knows about Leonardo using the eye of the camera as Leonardo's eye.
Well, it was very surreal. I went to the auction, first major auction I'd ever been to, just by virtue of the fact I was an invited player because I wrote a very short introduction to the catalog. And you go, and there's this rather small auction room, and there are people bidding. And it's over. I don't know how long it took. Nothing flat. There are people on the telephone, and there are people present. And it's over. It's sold for over $30 million. Nobody knows who bought it. Nobody knows who bought it that evening.
Well, there's a number of notebooks of Leonardo's that are preserved. They think there's quite a few others that weren't preserved. This particular notebook was owned by the Earl of Leicester and then was bought by an American. He made a lot of mistakes about did he really pay for it properly, and so it had to be auctioned. I bid for it over the phone, and I didn't want people to know who I was.
We're the Classical Radio Station here at 98.1 today, broadcasting live from SAM, Seattle Art Museum, downtown Seattle, as it is opening day for Leonardo Lives. And live indeed he does. 500 years gone, but just around the corner. Not so bad, huh?
18 sheets of paper that are covered with writing and drawings on the front and back. And you can see that we have special cases that are designed to protect the manuscript from high light levels because it's very old and fragile.
The Codex letter is a very funny thing. It's not what we think of as a book, and it's hardly what we think of as a manuscript. It consists of a series of pages. As a left-hander, he wrote back to front. He would tend to start at the back and go there, 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 and there. And then he'd go on to another page and do the same thing. And what seems to have happened is that he had a whole series of things which were more or less unrelated topics, the body of the earth and water. He then stitched them together, I think, or at least they were gathered together. A kind of laboratory of mobile thought rather than a book or a manuscript in the sense in which we would think of it.
His genius, and Martin Kemp talks about this in his book, the thing that set Leonardo apart from almost anybody before his time, or many people after his time, is that he saw with incredible acuity and speed and was able to link that, without going through words and so forth, into what his hand could do. In that trip through his brain to the hand, meaning got into it.
But thinking about water in Seattle and moving around, one of the great motives of Leonardo is that you collaborated with water, you collaborated with how fluids move around in the body of the earth. And modern cities, we often lose sight of that, but Seattle's surrounded by water. It's really incumbent on a modern city to say, we have this natural environment, we work with it rather than pushing it around.
I mean, I think it's actually one of the cities where we've actually taken the time to do that. We've actually had to, because there is so much water here. We deal with so much rain, all of the lakes, the salmon, all of the things that make Seattle wonderful and that make it Seattle. really have to do with understanding and getting to know the water and working with it, which a lot of cities don't really kind of take the time to do.
He would have loved Seattle because this is the most dangerous area in the entire United States. It has blown before. Tacoma and Seattle rest on mud flows from Rainier, and whereas I don't think anyone should cancel multi-year magazine subscriptions, it's probably going to happen again.
And now, with the Leonardo da Vinci CD-ROM and the Corbis Codescope, you can delve into his mind and work as never before. It's simply a product beyond comparison. Not only will you find Leonardo's Codex Leicester, its unique translator, and a never-before-assembled collection of his work, you learn the complete story of Leonardo's life and times. Order today for this amazing product.
I'm interested in how, with a body of thought like Leonardo, which is very non-linear, which moves around fluidly all the time, how you can use the medium to cope with that. And the second is what I call scratching itches, which Leonardo couldn't reach. He had static media. You look at his drawings and he always wants things to move. He wants them to get going. And in a whole series of areas, I felt we could collaborate with Leonardo, not simply store the images and provide people with a standard narration, but actually to get computers working with him.
I think the key for us was really understanding that they weren't drawings in isolation, that every drawing, no matter how small, somehow related to the text and they were integrated with one another.
There's a great dialogue now between Leonardo and new technologies. You know, if we look at how he treats the reflected light on the back of the moon, it's exactly the same as the reflected light on the back of Mona Lisa's cheek. You know, they're not separate things for Leonardo. The effects of light on the moon are the same in principle as the effects of light on a beautifully painted head. So, you know, which is science and which is art?
The Codex is a scientific document based on Leonardo's conjecturing and experiments with water. What I needed to do was surround that with color and drama and bring art to it in conjunction with our curators.
This painting is actually a good touchstone for that because it has evidence of all of Leonardo's interests at the time he was working on the Codex, the geological stratification of the rocks, the way that the mountains kind of burst forward from the surface, and the blue atmosphere as you go into the distance. All of these are based on his observations that he was recording in this manuscript.
He interacts with all of the artists who quote him, and why would so many artists quote him? And I'll just sort of go through the various intersections, starting really with Marcel Duchamp, who's the toughest character of all. He really, as a Dada artist, takes an anti-bourgeois stance and basically horrifies the respectable world by putting a mustache and a goatee on the Mona Lisa, and it won't go away as an artistic strategy. I'm an American citizen now, but I think I can say the good old American tradition of debunking and of making fun of hallowed icons, and something like Robert Arneson, the works that you'll see up there by Arneson are I think are truly brilliant, wonderfully made objects, but also incredibly funny.
parts to the show. One is the Renaissance work, Leonardo's contemporaries, etc. Then there's the pages of the Codex in the second gallery. The third gallery has the modern work, people dealing with Leonardo's imagery or subject matter. And then this would be the fourth part, what we call Leonardo's laboratory. We call this the water impact box. It comes directly from this drawing Leonardo's done of a sense of measuring tool at the bottom of a waterfall. And if we look at this, we can see we have a fulcrum and an arm, the weight on one end, and a plate for receiving the impact of the water on the other end, and of course our water coming over a waterfall. In a sense, he's looking at truths, and truths hold no matter when you look at them. I can show you where it directly applies today to Seattle, in that Seattle uses hydroelectric power, which means that their engineers understand that to get their turbines to move quicker and more efficiently, that they want them down at the bottom of the waterfall instead of at the top next to the water flow, and that's where this applies. Some of the most fun visitors for me are the hydro engineers who come in and can teach me something or argue with me or simply agree with what Leonardo has determined.
On that side.
Yeah, we can just like see right through it.
So after watching this, do you think we should put any bubbles in our drama project?
Yeah.
Any last words about this exhibit and our production?
This is pretty It's going to be awesome.
At the museum. Last spring, the Seattle Repertory Theater invited me and my drama students to participate in a project around the notebooks of Leonardo and the production at the Seattle Rep, as well as the actual Codex Lester being shown at the Seattle Art Museum.
What are you looking at?
Oh.
Yes, what are you looking at?
Nothing. I was, Hey, what was I looking at?
You were looking at her butt!
How come you get upset at him looking at your butt if you say, hey, sexy, when you walk by?
We have several artists in the classroom. We have a director, we have a playwright, we have a musician, and we have a scenic artist. And as well, one of the art classes has a silkscreen artist, and those silkscreens are going to become a part of our set. And the students have created their own notebooks, very much like Leonardo's notebooks.
Your mama.
So we decided that a notebook was a collection of responses to their world. The students are very sophisticated observers, and something to remember is that they've been watching television and movies and commercials for many, many years, and I believe that has made them sophisticated observers. The trick, I think, is figuring out how to make them conscious that they have a lot to say about their world.
The other thing which, he would always be thinking about in a situation like this is, why do birds stay up? How do these heavy things stay up there? And this is against the natural desire of heavy elements to fall. And he sees these almost as desires. I mean, he says water desires to find its level, air desires to find its level. And there's this fascination then with overcoming that. So all these studies of the birds and how you achieve flight.
And so he started building models, small models like you usually would if you're designing something, and trying them out. And then his drive for a long time was towards human-powered flight. The idea of a person being able to literally, physically flap their wings and fly.
It's the journey that's important. With the Raven, for instance, it's developing the airplane and getting to it. The actual flight is, I won't say anticlimactic, but as the designer, once the airplane flies, boy.
The Raven Project is an educational program that we put together to have all different kinds of college students, undergraduate and the like, working together to do something that none of them could do individually. The airplane is designed to fly 100 miles under the power of a single pilot. The idea was we get this airplane set up and we fly it down through the Puget Sound, and everyone who's had the opportunity to work on it can just go down to the waterfront and watch the airplane that they built fly by.
Everyone's a dreamer, but to find people who want to follow their dreams, boy,
that's Leonardo. See, that's part of my talk will be about him being one that would take action on his dream.
If you have both the dreams and the technical background to pull them off, that's the rare thing.
Some people say that Bill Gates had an ulterior motive in spending more than $30 million to acquire the Codex Leicester, and for exhibiting it in museums all over the world before installing it in a special room designed for it in his new Medina home.
We're supposed to make a subliminal connection, these critics say, between Leonardo, top genius of the Renaissance, and Chairman Bill, top genius of Renaissance II, the computer age.
Maybe. I doubt it. Bill Gates' worst enemy would never deny that the man is smart. He's certainly smart enough to be able to feel the difference between his own tactical cleverness, business acumen, and ruthless, if smiling, aggressiveness, and the inward-turned, selfless, obsessive pursuit of what Milton called the hidden soul of harmony, exhibited by Leonardo. I suspect that Gates wanted the Codex Leicester around him for much the same reason that a medieval contemplative kept a skull in his chamber, as a way of maintaining a sense of proportion, of one's own modest place in the grand scheme of things.
I expected when I pick up the Seattle Weekly and see this on the cover, I expect your iconoclasm. I expect you, by the end of it, to blow him to bits. And that's not what I found.
If we're looking for formulaic iconoclasm, what you want to do in Seattle is to say something nice about Bill Gates. Bill looms so over our little valley here that it's routine to knock him. I knock him plenty myself. He is the director of an extremely powerful corporation. But that doesn't mean that he as an individual is a megalomaniac. I don't think he is, or I wouldn't have written that. I think they might think he bought it because he had $30 million to spare and that he thought it was neat. You know, Bill thinks things are neat, and certainly the Codex Leicester is neat.
Yeah, when I grew up, I read a lot about history, and particularly history of science. You know, scientists seem interesting to me. The idea that one person could figure something out that nobody else understood and then explain it to other people. You know, that idea that they just, what did they do? Just concentrate, or how did they do that? And so there's a lot of fascinating figures in the history of science. Even some recent scientists, I think, are quite incredible. But Leonardo, to me, was sort of the most interesting. He wandered around as a kid because at that time, you were either sort of a noble person who went to school, or you were somebody who worked on the farm. And because he was the son of a noble man, but not by that man's wife, He was in a strange category. That's why he doesn't really have a last name. His name, Leonardo da Vinci, just means Leonardo of the town that he grew up in, which was Vinci. But everybody's always debated a little bit, which do you think of him more as a scientist or an artist? He probably contributed more to science than to art because of the notebooks.
We have a really special Leonardo da Vinci workbook here that is just full of wonderful things. Absolutely full of wonderful things.
Some of the things that we did in the workshop today are inspired by Leonardo da Vinci's notebook, and because he was had such a broad range of interests. And we thought we'd focus on one part of the discovery, and that was why do things float or why do things sink? And it's a real hands-on workshop, and that's what the kids seem to like the best. As adults, we may be tuned into just listening to somebody talk at us at a lecture hall or any type of a meeting. But as you notice today, we had clay, very tactile. We had water, we had pressure, we had vision, we had words. And so the adults, to them, that's something that's very nice. And adults learn the same way as children do. Show me, and then let me do it, and then I will learn.
It's one of the things I noticed about working on the project was that every time I walked through Seattle from then on, I was noticing things. And it's actually quite exhausting because you don't ever stop considering everything, especially so many of the cloud formations that we have here and the way the mountains look on different days. Some days you see Mount Rainier and some days you can't. And all those permutations, really, especially I think in Seattle where there is so much nature around, it really becomes an obsession, which is kind of nice.
It's what in the 18th, early 19th century some of the people wrote about art called the art of seeing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an art we don't have all that much.
No.
We live in a visual society, but we've lost the art of seeing. That is to say, the critical act of looking really intensively at something rather than just taking it for granted.
Yeah.
Leonardo never took things for granted. There's a big lesson there.
Definitely.